Welcome to the Man Amongst Men podcast. Live a life of intentionality, adventure, and brotherhood. Take the inner journey and live out over your edge constantly. Here are your hosts, Dominic and Bryan.
This was a really fun podcast for Bryan and I to record because the tables have been turned on us. We are the ones being interviewed on our own podcast by a woman named Monica Yates, who is a life coach based out of Australia, and she's a life coach for women. And so we met Monica at an event here in New York City called Bold Leap Live, which was an entrepreneurial event for women that Bryan and I spoke at. And as soon as we connected with Monica, we knew we needed to do a recording together. Her audience is pretty much 100% women. And she came over, we sat down for 2 hours and she fired off questions to us, and we've distilled down the best ones that we thought would be most appropriate for our audience to hear. Now, the way that Monica got her questions is that she went out to her audience, her Instagram following of women, and said, what are the questions that we want answered from guys? And so some of the questions that came to us that we'll be answering in this interview: what was the hardest thing growing up as a male? Do guys like it more when women take control sexually? How do I get my man to open up to me and tell me what's going on inside of him? Why don't more guys approach me at bars? And early on in dating, how can a woman tell when a man is really being real versus just feeding her some lines or just wanting to hook up? What advice do you have for a businesswoman who is more successful than her man and he's starting to feel like not enough because of it? And then she asks, what do Bryan and I look for in a woman? So we hope you enjoyed this conversation. It was really fun being on the other side of it. And let us know if you like this format.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Cacao and Convos. I'm so excited to have some beautiful gentlemen here with me. We've already tried to record this intro and it fucked up. That's how we're all laughing. So, do you guys want to introduce yourselves for me?
Hi, this is Bryan and Stacy for the second time.
Yeah.
Back when I was 30 years old, about 8 years ago, I started feeling pain in my left testicle. And I did what a lot of guys do, which was nothing. And I waited about 3 months before I went in to get checked out. And when I did, I was diagnosed with both testicular cancer and chlamydia. And for me, that was a huge wake-up call. I went from like a 0 out of 10 talking about sex and sexual health things. And since then, I started a sexual health company where people can download an app, talk to a doctor, get tested for STIs, and then spur the conversation with a partner. I've been speaking on that subject now for the last 3 years, and that's where we're at.
Love it. I actually basically entered a relationship because I asked about, have you got an STD check? And then he freaked out, and it was not a freak out conversation that needed to be had. And then went super cold. So it's so interesting how this is so triggering for some people because there's so much stigma. And actually my last Cacao and Convos, do you know Lindsay Wynn? She owns a company called Mamatara. It's basically vaginal wellness company. It's all natural. Instead of taking drugs for UTIs, you take this all natural cream. We were talking all about this stuff and just how there's such a fucking stigma. And it's yeah, you don't want an STD, but also if you get one, you take antibiotics, life goes on. And because there's no conversation about it, it's not normalized. So nobody wants to talk about it in case they think there could be something. They're nope, don't talk about it. And even I've woken up with this chest pain and I'm Mom, do I need to go to the doctor? Am I going to die? I'm fine. It's just a muscle thing. But don't not listen to your body.
Yeah, women, generally speaking, are better at listening to their body, going to the doctor and getting things taken care of. And we'll dive deeper into some of the interactions when it comes to asking somebody or telling somebody about your sexual health situation.
Dominic, go for it.
I'm Dominic Cortuccio. I'm the only one at the table actually drinking cacao because I'm a cacao purist.
I've already had mine this morning.
Okay. Yeah.
But I'm cacao-less. I'm purely cacao-less.
There's a hierarchy here. So I am a speaker and an executive coach to high-performing men and women and an author, and I just gave Monica a copy of my book called Design Your Future, 3 Simple Steps to Stop Drifting and Take Command of Your Life. And I spent 15 years in the high-stakes financial services arena working for a Fortune 75 company, running a sales organization that had $1.5 billion annual sales goal. And I had an opportunity to work with a lot of people who had achieved success, but on the inside started to feel a sense of disconnection, a sense of restlessness, or being trapped in the lives they've created for themselves. And so working with Bryan, we help lead people on the inner journey to do inner work, typically for the first time in their lives. And a bigger part of our work that's really emerging over the past, 6 or 7 months or so, is really working with men and women and bridging the gaps between the communication barriers, especially in male-dominated businesses, especially with high-performing women entrepreneurs who are rising so quickly, and men in their lives can't seem to keep up, and there's the tension there. And Bryan and I are working on bridging that communication gap so that each side can understand one another.
Oh my God, because it's literally like different languages. We're both speaking English, but the meaning behind words is so different. I found that when you can understand what you're actually meaning to say, to be able to say it the way that he needs to hear it, everything is easier. So much easier. You don't get into unnecessary fights, but also I feel like a lot of women, they do the work, and then the other side, it's like, oh, I'm communicating the way that you want to be communicated with, but then you need to also communicate the way that I need to be communicated with. So that two-way street is really important.
One of the things that we're finding in the work that we're doing with women is that there's just a sense of exhaustion around how many more times do I have to put this on my shoulders before a man starts to wake up and pay attention. I'm doing the work. I'm trying to bring him in on it. How come he's not interested? He's really interested when it's time to sext.
Yes.
Right. He's really interested in these kinds of moments, very highly engaged. And maybe over the course of our conversation today, we can talk about those different ways to allure him in, to invite him in. The timing also matters of when the invitation's extended.
Yeah. Don't do it when he's trying to go to sleep.
Not when he's trying to go to sleep, not when he's watching footy, or not when he's, these kinds of things.
Yeah.
There are certain moments that a man is much more receptive.
Let's talk about that, because I would love to know. You never want to tell a man or imply that he's not already good enough or that he's a failure. So sometimes even I will worry that if I mention something to him, he's going to take that as you're not good enough for me, you're failing, you're a failure. And it's like, no, I don't mean that. I just want you to be better. How do you say that?
Just
be
don't.
better.
Yeah, don't start with that. Don't start with just be better. Why can't you just be better? Because it confuses us. We're there's no direction. There's no, and what's happening in your body, you're having this feeling of I want better and I want something that's different. Yeah. But a guy receives this, and I've been this guy. Well, what are you talking about? Do you want me to be more on time? Do you want me to pay for dinner more often? Do you want me to be better in bed?
And we'll just go everything. Just
all
be
of it.
better.
Just
and
be
you're
better.
What the fuck?
Yeah. Yeah. And guys, if you think they're very directive, right? A woman can walk into a shop. I'm speaking generalities here, but the feminine, the women, they can walk into a store and just shop and see, and I'm not totally sure what I want. And guys go in, they're like, I need the shirt. I need the pants. Right? So when speaking with guys, it's helpful, if possible, to be specific and also call them in.
Yeah.
Instead of calling them out.
Yeah. We talk a lot about Alison Armstrong. Right?
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan, and one of her books is called The Queen's Code. And she says that one of the key problems she sees with women who are trying to bring out the best in their men is that they become frog farmers. Oh. What she means by this is if you have a prince that's standing in front of you, does your language that you use turn him into a king, or does it turn him back into a frog?
Oh, damn, I love that.
Right? And she's like, listen, there's typically some resistance around this at first because, again, it goes back to the how come we as women have to continue to modify and to acquiesce and these kinds of things. But she's like, there's certain ways in which you can allure a man into a conversation that can bring out the king in him. For me, there were times where, with a partner in the past, where she was like, hey, listen, I love the sex that we're having. And what would be really, really nice for me next time is if you created some mystery or some seduction, because man, I will show you sides of me that you've never seen before.
Yeah, I always say that. It's you've got to give that positive affirmation to men, and don't be like, yeah, it's great, but, because then it's you're just saying that actually it's not that great.
Such a key word.
Don't use but, use and.
Right. Bryan and I use this all the time. It's the but just kind of eliminates everything you just said up until that point. Yeah. The and is an additive, and it's oh, cool, I'm a hero, I am providing, and there's something else that she wants that I could provide that's going to light her up. Sign me up.
Yeah, really quick on the and thing. I do like that because it continues the conversation. Also, guys will tune in really quick if you're just replacing the but. If you're just saying da-da-da-da-da, and, right, use that 2 times, and the guy's like, that actually means but.
Yes.
So being really careful.
Okay, good to know, good to know.
The suggestion that I have for women is to, when explaining something, and you can say something very specific, like the example that Dominic gave, but let the guy know the impact on you.
Yeah, when you said that, you talk about how it makes you feel, I was like, damn.
Yes.
Yeah.
How it makes you feel, what it makes you think. Because guys, we are fixers. We love to fix shit. If something's broken, we want to fix it. That's just in the masculine.
Yeah, but I love that.
And so if somebody, and you love that, right? And so if you tell somebody like, you're just doing this wrong.
Yeah.
All that matters in that conversation is that guy is wrong.
Yeah.
But if you say, hey, this is what happened factually, and when that happened, it made me feel sad and it made me feel contracted. I just sat down and I had less energy all day, and like, that doesn't feel great. Me as a guy, if I hear that, I'm like, I want to fix that. Like, I don't want to make Monica feel like shit. I don't want to make her like energy low. Like, I love when she's high vibe.
Yeah.
So I'm going to fix it.
And you know what? It's not just even
God, I love
hearing
this.
that. It's like can you say the words, but can I really feel you more than the words that are coming out of your mouth? Because you can say something like, hey, Bryan, you're my hero for what you just did. But there's something different than when this energy that comes out, maybe there's tears in her eyes. Maybe there's like a little bit
It's
of
that
sitting on
slow
the lap.
sensuality. Like, it's the
Yes.
slow movement. Like, that's why also it's like if you're with a guy and you slowly blink or you slowly pick up it's just that slow, like, soft, sensual.
Oh my God,
It's
she's doing it right now.
sorry.
It's happening. Turn it fast. Speed it up. Turn it up.
But yeah, like, it fucking works.
Yes, it does work.
It does work. Okay, let's jump into some of these questions because there is so many. Okay, first one, and this is my favorite one ever. I know the answer for me. Thoughts on period sex. I will just actually say, the last guy that I was seeing, I was like, I'm all for period sex. Like, it's my favorite thing in the world, right? And he was like 30, never had it before. So he was like traumatized by the whole thing. And I get, for a guy, it can be really overwhelming. Sometimes, like, blood everywhere. Thoughts, what do you like about it?
Oh, you can go first, Dominic. Okay. That's all you.
I'll step on this one first.
Yeah.
So I've always been a yes.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that for some reason, for most of my life, like, I thought that there was something chivalrous about that. Like, I thought, I was like, oh, look at me. I'm not bothered by it. You know?
Oh, I like that. Okay.
But it really wasn't. It was just like, I wanted to have sex, right? and as I've been learning about some of the stuff that Monica, that you shared, and also another woman who came to one of our events called The Discerning Dick. We run this live event series in New York City for men called The Discerning Dick, Sexual Wisdom for the Modern Man. And we had this one panel
Sounds
where
so good.
it's been amazing. And we had this one panel where it was women teach men. The entire event was them teaching us. And one woman shared the cycles journey. And one of the things that she said was that I'm finding that it's pretty black or white with a woman when it comes to whether or not she wants to have period sex. Either she's totally in on it or she's not. And that made me think back over the course of my interactions with a woman, sexually speaking, and I never not having that awareness. I wonder if she didn't want to have sex. I wonder if she felt maybe that there was something that she was uncomfortable about, or she didn't feel beautiful in the moment, or she was doing it because she thought that I needed it or wanted it, because I didn't have that awareness.
Yeah.
And here I was thinking I was doing the right thing.
Yeah.
But now that new awareness is going to allow me to have these conversations around, hey, how do you feel about it? Like,
Yeah.
are you feeling sexual? Would you rather just do something? Should we lie together? Should I put my hand on your belly?
Yeah.
Can we just look at one another? What would you
Yeah.
be down for?
And I think it's really important to also say from, like, a woman's perspective with this, it's like some women will get a massive increase in their libido when they get their period because of their hormones, right? Now that is like pretty normal, and not like as in normal as in shouldn't be there, but it happens to everybody, common as in PMS is common but not normal. It's like really normal that will happen. If you find that when it comes to your period time and you do not want to be seen, touched, anything, you could have a hormone imbalance, right? So it's also important to be like, are my hormones balanced? And for a lot of women, if they hate their periods, they don't want to lie in their own blood. If they don't even love that time of the month, they're not going to want to be like covered in their own blood. Whereas me, I love my periods. I'm like, yeah, let's lather this shit all over me. But like, except for my face.
Right, we talked about that.
Yeah. But yeah, it's an interesting conversation to have. And what breaks my heart a lot, like a lot of women, a lot of my clients, I'll ask the question of, and this is like everyone always says yes, of how many of you have had sex when 99% of you was like yes and 1% no, because that's not good. Like, you don't want, like, you've got to be in a situation where you can comfortably say, I do want to have sex with you, but I'm actually like kind of a no right now. And that's okay, because if you keep having sex when you don't want to have sex, it just like shuts you down and creates those energetic blocks that you don't want.
Yeah. That's come up in conversation with a number of women I've been speaking to recently, where they have now stepped from this place of when they were at 1% no, they would still go for it after, and like feeling the consequence of this. So they're no longer willing to stand for that.
Yeah,
so now they're speaking up and they're saying no. And now there's this new set of problems, which is the man's emotional reaction.
Oh my God, I know, right? Because then it becomes that whole like women squashing men thing. And it's like, and that's where I feel like there's such a problem with this. I don't even know how to word it properly, but it's like such a big rape issue, such a big abuse issue. Now that's what I was saying when I was talking the other day of like, women are squashing men. I feel like for so many men, they're afraid of being forward for a woman because then he's like, oh, well, I don't want her to think that I'm being like rude or pushy or whatever. And it's like, fuck, where the hell's the balance to this?
Mm-hmm. Is there a right answer?
Well, yeah, I know, right? I feel like it depends on each person.
I feel like part of the work that Dominic and I do is there is a space, right? Was it Viktor Frankl? So there's a space between a action and a response or a stimulus and response. And sometimes that in between, that space is very, very small. So if a woman rejects a man, all of a sudden he gets upset and the ego's bruised and like becomes angry.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the work we do is to help increase the size of that space in between and to add, instead of just a quick reaction in that space, come into something with some curiosity.
Choice.
And choice and understanding that, hey, this is a no for this person. This is not a reflection on me. I know who I am.
Yeah, and that's, again, where that inner work is so important, getting rid of those childhood wounds, all the ego crap. Like, there are a lot of men out there that have very big egos, as are women. But, boy, when you do the work, you know when someone hasn't done the work because they are triggered like no one's business and so unavailable for a conversation.
Yeah. You know what was interesting was after the Bold Leap event,
Yeah.
there was a woman who came up to me afterwards and she said, I've had so many men come up to me and tell me that they can protect me, that they're safe with me, that you can lean into me. And she's like, I hear the words and I don't feel any of it. I feel a resistance because he's speaking a language, but he hasn't done the work. And she was like, when I saw the four of you guys on stage, it was Bryan and I and two other like really embodied men. She was like, you said none of those things. You didn't say you're safe with me or I can protect you. She was like, I just felt this cord that connected
100%.
me to the four of you because like there was this calmness to you. There was a sense of you've done the work, you've gone to some place. And by the way, Bryan and I are not angels. We're not perfect. Like a big part of our history before was like learning how to fumble around and get to this space. I don't know if I shared this with you, Monica, but I spent 4 years in Sex Addicts Anonymous.
No, you didn't share that. Okay.
I didn't share that. That's a big part of my story.
Okay.
That was from 2013, 2017, because I, from a very early age, I never learned how to embrace my sexual energy. It was something that was not welcome in the Catholic faith. In my household, it was taboo. And so like I learned to keep that side of me private. And I had these two separate worlds, the public-facing Dominic, the private Dominic that like really liked this feeling but felt I was doing something bad and wrong.
Right.
And that created like a real chasm between those two worlds over the course of time where eventually it broke down. And that was a big part of my journey on doing the inner work.
You're so right about the energy thing, though, because one of my exes was like, I actually met him at a Tony Robbins event. Everything he did and blah, 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 like so masculine, yeah, so safe. He had the biggest fucking mummy issues. And I actually didn't feel safe with him. Like, yes, there was a trigger there for me as well from my past. But ultimately, because he had in his brain women not were out to get him, but like his mum abused him. So if ever I got really like, because I'm quite fiery, when I got fiery, that triggered him. And so ultimately, I didn't feel like I could be my fullest version and that I could be safe with him. Okay, so back to how we can invite men in. How can we invite men in to do the inner work? Because we all need to do the inner work. And my favorite line from a guy is, oh, no, I don't have any issues. I'm like, well, you have so many issues. So
You just haven't found them yet. Let me hit your triggers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I know his issues.
Yeah, you can see them. Yeah, the person who says they know themselves and they have no issues, those are the ones who have the most.
The most. 100%.
Those are the most dangerous people in the room because they're blind. Blind to it.
Yeah.
Always. Bryan and I are huge fans of the Trojan horse. If you're not familiar with what the Trojan horse is, it's basically like the concept of sell someone what they want and deliver them what they need. So, for example, Mark Manson, who's famous for writing the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
Yeah.
He wrote a book before that, which is called Models Attract Women Through Honesty. And it was kind of a bookend to this other book that came out called The Game by Neil Strauss. So The Game by Neil Strauss Every man about 10 years ago who was a single man read this book. It was a pickup artist's dream. It kind of was written for men who had never gone out and who didn't have game and who were constantly being rejected by women who were powerless over it. And Neil Strauss wrote this book that was highly manipulative, lots of techniques on how to make a woman feel less than so that a man can establish a place of superiority.
Fuck.
And so that like he could get back game, and that stuff worked. And the way that we liken it is like basically that was the BP oil spill of the dating world. Like eventually there was a cap put on it, but there's oil that's in the ocean. Like it's like you're never going to clean it all up, right?
Fuck, yeah.
Mark Manson wrote a different book, which was about models attracting women through honesty. And when you first hear the word models as a man, you're thinking like supermodels, you're thinking Victoria's Secret. And it has a double meaning. Part of it is he's talking about that, but the other part is he's talking about like model men. And the man who picks up that book is trying to attract a woman. So he's doing it not for like these altruistic reasons. He's like, I want a woman. And I can't tell you how many men have come to us and told us, I got tricked into personal development by reading that book because it's not a pickup artist book. Even though I learned how to attract women, I learned how to talk to women differently, I learned how to build confidence and to approach women, it was really about me doing the inner work.
Wow.
So
we should all hand
Trojan
out that
horse.
book, basically.
There's some stuff in there that Bryan and I also would like. We don't think it has enough of an emphasis on honoring women and respecting women. It's still like kind of myopically focused on a man getting what he wants without really broadening the conversation.
Yeah.
It's a good example of a Trojan horse.
Okay.
A man
Okay.
thinks he's buying a pickup artist book, and then he's tricked into doing inner work.
Well, and what I always say, because someone was asking at Bold Leap Live about, she just left an 11-year relationship and she wants a new one, blah, blah, blah. And I always say your man needs to be the cherry on top of your already perfect gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free cupcake, right? So it's like you have to do the work beforehand so you get into a good relationship. And so that when shit hits the fan, you know it's not my fault, right? Like you can let him do his thing. Timing is important. You don't start blaming yourself because women have this thing where we blame ourselves. Like when a relationship ends, we will run it through our brain 1,000,001 times. What could I have done better? Where was I wrong? To try and get him back, right? Because ultimately it's all about safety and, you know, like you can hunt and protect and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, again, it's like fucking do the inner work because you are not to blame.
Yeah.
Like you are not to blame. I just wrote down a question when you were talking. When a man is picking up a woman, blah, 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 and doing all that fun stuff, how do you know when a man actually means what he's saying and not just saying the right things, right? Because you can fucking Google how to please a woman. How do you know when he actually means it?
If you're going back to what they talked about in the game, there's lines. There's ways to create a response in a woman. Those lines only go about an inch deep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so if a woman is curious, she'll slow the guy down and go deep and find very quickly that we're already at the bottom.
Yeah.
And so a guy, if you look at the other book that Dominic referenced, Models, these guys are being authentic. They're living lives that are adventurous. They're living lives that are interesting. They have perspective. And that perspective really has no end.
Yeah.
And so going into what that is and getting to understand if the guy actually has a feeling and an emotion associated with his belief, you're going to know very quickly whether or not this is something real or is this a line that's coming out. And so if you think about like skipping a stone across water and
Yeah.
right, that's the line, that's the game. If you drop it in, you go blunk, and you just see that thing drop, that's a real guy. That's a guy that's done the work.
Love it. Where can we find more of them?
Men's groups. Yeah. Men's groups, seriously. And then that's remember we talked about this the other day, which was...
Oh, New York is good for all this shit. Australia I know it's a limiting belief. There are obviously places in Australia, but like you guys are so developed in this area. And because there's such a big population, you can have these things and they succeed.
I have some roots in Australia. I've been there 10 times over the last 3 years. I have some like really deep relationships with men over there. And the Mankind Project has been in Australia for over 2 decades. And
So we need to all Google that shit.
Yeah, the Mankind Project. And from my understanding, they're all across Australia. So there's deep work going on there. One of my good buddies, his name is Sam Webb. He runs a charity called Livin'.
I've met him. Yeah.
You know Sammy?
Yeah, well, I don't know him, but I've met him. Yeah, I was at an event with him and I met him.
Oh, nice. He's going to be here next week doing his TEDx talk. Or no, this week. It's on tomorrow. Holy shit, yeah, it's tomorrow. So he's here.
Okay.
He and the men that he runs with are also in that space because he's working on like mental health and destigmatizing that stuff too.
It was actually quite interesting. Someone was saying to me at the event, I've done a lot of work in terms of getting rid of this idea of there aren't good men out there, because there are. I mean, we've got two sitting in front of you, like there are, right? And as soon as I actually switched my thinking to be like, there are so many good men out there, it's so easy to meet men, because I was like, it's so hard to meet men, it's so hard to meet men. I started meeting them everywhere because I thought about it and I was like, you can meet them at the post office, you can meet them at Woolies, which is like a supermarket. And then I started like meeting men when I was like getting jeans before I flew here last time. I had like a 2-hour conversation with the guy in the shop. And then it was like, even like Uber drivers. One time I got picked up by the hottest Uber driver ever. I was like, oh my God. You got to put your reticular activating system on that thought of so easy to meet good men.
Totally. And one more point on this is that once you meet a good man and he breaks open this new paradigm of what you could ask for, what you could expect from a man, then you have like a model that you can witness and say, that's what it looks like. That's what he looks like. And then you're like, I'm no longer going to settle for whatever it was, where my bar was before. How can I find more like him? And that's when your reality that you just described can start to crack open. It's going to happen in dressing room, outside the dressing rooms, hopefully, at first. In Ubers, at Woolies, and wherever else.
Yeah. It's so true. Okay, amazing. So let's keep going. Next question. Okay. Oh, this is a good one. Same as what we were talking about at the event. How do you deal with being quote unquote better / more successful than your man? And of course, I'm assuming this is like people's idea of more successful, better, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a personal reaction to that, which is just deal with it. Like, that sounds great. Like, I see a relationship where it's just like we're two individuals. We're here. We have a purpose. My number one belief in life is that every human has a purpose.
Yeah.
And we're here for a reason. And when we come together in a relationship as a couple, I want to see her do that.
Yeah.
And rock
so
it no
hot when
matter
you see
what that
somebody in their
is.
element. So hot.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I want to have the freedom to do that exact same thing. And then I want to come together and celebrate in whatever way that is.
Yeah.
And so I think the easy answer for me is if a guy is not doing that, conversations need to be had.
Oh my God, I love that. And also from a woman's perspective, ladies, feminine. You can go to work and be really fiery, but like drop into like that feminine, soft, warm version of yourself where when you're at home, your man can take care of you and you're not still in the office. Because that was the biggest thing for me of like, oh, I can be like super guns blazing at work, but then allow myself to drop into that feminine. So when I'm at home, I can be looked after and I'm not still looking after everybody else like I do at work.
Yeah. And for men, one of the things that is often blind to us with respect to our identities is what we believe it means to be a man. And so many of us have been raised to believe that to be a man, that we are providers, that we are the ones who can protect and providing in some cases can come in that financial form. And what you're talking about, the question that was asked is, if a woman doesn't need your financial well-being because maybe she's way outperforming you, then a man could be like, what is my value? What is my use? And then also when he goes drinking with his buddies, they'll relentlessly tease him, some may, about him being like, she wears the pants. Oh, she tells you what to do.
That,
are you a gigolo?
My heart. Fuck.
You know, there is some like real identity things that men have to consider, and that's why it's so important for a man to know where he can turn to re-identify, to like really actually craft his own definition for what it means to be a man versus the one that was handed to him, which causes a lot of the friction.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say he's not making the money. How else can he be the quote unquote provider, protector?
Yes.
Because like even I struggle with that of like, I make a ton more money than majority of people my age. And that for me is even a wounding thing in a relationship where sometimes I will feel the resentment for my job come up because of the money thing and because I want a man that can provide. Like I've always kind of said, and it's definitely a bit of I'm actually dealing with this right now, of like I always have wanted a man that makes more money than me. So if I'm making $500,000 a year or whatever it is going to be when I'm getting married, then he needs to be making $1 million a year. And like, that's fucked. That's not how it needs to be. How do you guys move through that?
You already answered the question for yourself.
It's fucked.
No, not that part. We're going to go back to a different part of the conversation, not the I'm fucked part. No, so you already mentioned it because you were talking about how women can go to work. They can be sometimes in their masculine and be fiery.
Yeah.
And then what you described, what you wanted. You want to be able to come home, flow into the feminine, and fall into the arms of a man that's there to support you. That requires $0.
So fucking true.
And so I think the answer is simply, what is it that you need, that you're looking for, that masculine? What are you craving in that masculine? Is he a planner? Maybe he's planning a vacation so that you can go just flow inside that container of the vacation.
Yeah.
So like, what is it? And for guys, we often don't recognize that that's a valuable role because we're doers. We want to do it. We want to plan it. We want to go. And so in that case, like we showed that through our financial wherewithal or through our financial means, but there's other roles that we can play. We were in a men's group here on Monday night. My personal coach, Dominic, the previous personal coach, he came in to teach our men's group some stuff. And he was talking about, there was one guy that was talking, sharing a story, and he was talking about how important every other guy in the room was at that moment. Because like looking at a play, you have actors, you have maybe the lead, you also have the props, you have the backdrop, and without all of that, the magic doesn't work. And relationships are the exact same way. A guy can be a backdrop, and God, that sounds like beta, I'm an alpha guy. But it's not. We flow and we move into these different places. So like being just the container, being the backdrop, being somebody to support when needed.
Oh my God, this is so much yes.
Is a beautiful role to play that we can do. And I never saw that as a role before.
Because even I say this in business with like my clients, it's like, let's create your masculine shell so you can flow throughout it. And that could be just like a little bit of structure that you need so that you can then flow and you don't go way too feminine, flowy out of nowhere. That's the same thing of like he can provide just that like shell and that does not need any money. It could be literally anything. And then you can flow through that.
Yeah. And we've heard for generations that behind every great man, there is a woman leading the way, or there's a woman doing all the work. And the question that Bryan and I want to ask is, why can't we flip that script and say, behind every successful woman,
oh my God,
there's a supportive man helping her light to shine. What we've started to notice is that women who are rising in the, say, entrepreneurial space or in male-dominated businesses or whatever business that they're in, it's oftentimes without the support of other men. And all that's needed is just like a little drop of support where a woman can feel that like this containment, and then she goes berserk. So I'll give you a really specific example. There was a woman who I'm friendly with. 2 years ago, we were spending some time together. She is one of the best at what she does in public relations and just top of the line in the country that she operates in. I'm just keeping her name private for personal reasons.
Yeah.
And so I asked her, I was like, hey, listen, if we get personal, how much money have you made in your best year?
Yeah.
And I'm expecting to hear something well over 7 figures.
Yeah.
And so she said to me, $180,000. And we were driving at the time. I basically came to a screeching halt. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
$180,000. Now, that's not insignificant money, but for who she is, it's like a drop in the bucket. I'm like, how? And we ended up spending some time talking about that. And I was like, you're no longer, I'm like, you're not a 7-figure woman 3 years from now. You are a 7-figure woman today.
Yeah.
What are we going to do differently? She was like, oh, okay. And her light switch, a lot like how you operate, Monica. In the next 6 weeks, I think it was 6 to 8 weeks, she pulled in $350,000.
Oh my God, yum.
Because she just made the decision and she had someone speak to her.
Yeah, we need to. Like, women's number one need is love and connection. And we were talking about this last night on my group call with my coach and the other girls that are in our little like mastermind together. And it's funny, we're all like meeting our soulmates and like it's just this weird thing where we're all going through the same shit. It's amazing. And we were actually talking about how as a woman, this will quantum leap your growth in business because you've got that next level love support container so you can like have that massive expansion. So yeah, if you're a woman in business, you need that love and connection and all that stuff if you want to grow your business. Like the two go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other.
I'm going to give that a yes and.
Yeah, yes.
And we're back.
It's a real and.
It's a real and.
And
so like yes and. The love and connection, I totally get that. And it doesn't have to come from a boyfriend or a husband or whoever else. It can be in Dominic's perfect case, like story. Right? He wasn't a boyfriend, but he was somebody that was a friend that was close.
Yeah.
That can provide that same sort of container.
100%. That's why I said on my Instagram story this morning, the containers of group programs where the one that I'm in at the moment, we literally just pay to have friends. That's all we're doing. We're paying to be together and talk. It is fucking magic because that like soul sister love connection, and they're just friends. It grows you because you've got that like warmth and protection and the people to lean back on when you need that. So you can take those big leaps that are a bit scary because you're like, oh, nothing bad's going to happen. I've got people that still love me.
Totally.
And it's like that shit is important for your brain.
And that gives that, we were talking about space earlier, that creates that space in which we can flow, we can be creative. We're not coming from a place of fear. We're not coming from a place of like, this has to happen exactly this way or else.
Love it. So good. Okay. Let's keep going. So, what do men look for in a woman they want a relationship with?
Oh, wow. So that is such a broad question.
Yeah.
Right? And the best way to answer it is to actually just answer from my own perspective. Because you ask this to 100 men, 100 men will answer differently. For me, I want a woman who is lit up in her own life. She is fully engaged in her life. There's something that she's passionate about that she doesn't need me for and that I could support her on, that there's something that she could teach me about in this world, whether it's how to tap into my heart in a deeper way, whether it's how to love art because I don't, to expand my perspective in my world. I would love for her to be fully expressed in her sexuality and sensuality where she could receive at a deep level.
Oh my God, stop. Yum.
Right? And there have been times where like I've been with women who there's been some blockages and like I've wanted to be there.
A lot of women, yeah.
And listen, I want to be very clear about this is that just because you have a blockage doesn't mean you can't be open to working through that. Like as long
100%.
Because I've got blockages too.
We all do. We're fucking humans. We all do.
We all do. And it's the awareness of that and to be able to like hang with it and work with a partner. Because there have been times where I've reached dead ends and even with all the techniques and the conversations that I've learned how to start, sometimes people are just not willing to go there.
Yeah.
And I've felt like, oh my God, I have so much more to give. You're not able to receive it. And it felt disconnecting for me.
Yeah.
So those are the things that I'm looking for.
I'm glad that you've mentioned that because this is coming up more and more, this issue with women and sensuality and stuff in my work of like, they want to tap into that more like erotic version of themselves, but there is the shame and the blocks, whatever. I'm doing a new program called Queen Alchemy and it's literally not about men. It's like your own pleasure. Because as a woman, if you don't think like, oh my God, what did my best friend say? I can't remember what she said. Basically, if you can't turn yourself on dancing in front of a mirror, then don't expect that you can turn your man on, right? Like this work is like your own stuff. If you've got those blocks, you don't need a boyfriend or a husband to work through them. You just have to be willing to work through them for yourself.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I don't know if that rule applies to guys because I just thought about me dancing naked in front of a mirror. And I got to be honest, I'm really turned off. Yeah.
I'm also turned off by that.
That's fair. Yeah.
By the thought of you, I'm fine with myself.
You could do the dancing. Okay. Monica, I just want to compare and contrast here really quick.
Yeah.
So with Dominic, I'm going to take this audio clip afterwards. I'm going to pull it out and then put it onto YouTube and be like, women, this is what Dominic's looking for. Because it was like, holy shit, man, that was gorgeous.
It was so good.
I want to compare and contrast that to a time right when I moved to New York and I was single. Yeah. And I was like, all right, I'm single. I'm going to go find the women or the
Vagina
woman
rampage.
that like, yeah, that's like for me, right? So I did what I think probably a lot of guys do.
Yeah.
I went to my Excel document. And
oh my God, wow.
Yeah, I started to write out all the things that I wanted, right? Okay. I want funny, I want a nice butt, I want a big smile, I want someone that's successful, I want somebody that challenges me, I want like all of these like blah, 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 blah sort of things, right? And then I prioritized them, of course, in another column, and I had a 1, a 2, a 3, then I said a must have, a nice to have, like cannot have, right? You have your no have list.
Yep, wow, love this.
Right? And so I'm talking to a friend about it.
Women aren't the only one that do this.
Yes, so this is true that happened. And by the way, I'm not recommending this, but this is what I did. And so I had a conversation with a friend, and he's like, well, what's on your list? Because we were doing it together. It was like a group, it was a buddy thing. We were doing a buddy thing. And he said, what's on your list? He's like, what's on your must-have list? I was like, well, she needs to be funny. I want somebody that's funny.
Yeah.
He's like, that's fair. I totally get that. Like, you're kind of a funny guy, and like I can see you guys being funny together. That's great. He's like, what else? I'm like, butt sex. He's like, and he goes, what? He's like, you have butt sex in your top 5 must-haves? Like, why?
Oh my God. Fuck that.
I'm like, look, because I've dated somebody in the past they weren't willing to explore, and I feel like that says a lot about somebody that's not willing to like look at different perspectives and everything else. So, butt sex.
Oh my God.
I tell the story only because, like, at that point
funny one.
in my life, I didn't do the work. I hadn't done any inner work.
Yeah.
And so I thought funny and butt sex was like top of the game. And you wonder why for years I was going in the wrong direction. I don't know. I personally don't know a lot of guys that could describe what Dominic described in terms of what he wants.
Yeah.
I think a lot of guys are more on where I was at with the Excel document.
Yeah.
So that's what I was identifying. And I identified women that like butt sex and I identified funny women. And none of them were the right ones for me.
Yeah.
So the point is, a lot of times we can't articulate what exactly it is that we want.
Okay. So basically, just be yourself.
Do the work. And then know yourself.
Wait, are we talking to men or women right
To
now?
women. Like, as a woman,
I see.
be you, and like the right man will love that.
Yes, and
Yes.
also like the right man will learn how to love that also, because there's like a teaching process to it as well. Like there's the relationship that probably transformed my life was with a woman named, she's like my best friend now. Her name is Grace Gold. I dated her right after I graduated college.
Now everyone's gonna Instagram stalk her.
Yeah, she's phenomenal. So Grace was like my first portal to diversity. I'd grown up in a really whitewashed neighborhood in Ramsey, New Jersey, went to a pretty white, homogeneous school, University of Richmond in Virginia, and had some amazing like friends and experiences, but my worldview was narrow. She's half Indian and half Jewish. And she didn't like sports, she didn't drink. Like these were the biggest things in my life. And she taught me how to love reading the New York Times. She taught me personal development. She was the woman who introduced me to personal development. She gave me The Way of the Superior Man by David
Oh my
Yates.
God, that book is so fucking good.
Amazing, right?
Amazing book.
She was the one who sent me to the Landmark Forum for my very first personal development program. And so she taught me, and she speaks the King's Code. She always knew how to get me to listen in a way that I could hear her.
Fuck, I need to study that Alison Armstrong book.
She's amazing, yeah.
Okay.
And Grace just had this naturally about her. Like she just knew how to do it, but she followed the same principles. She just put breadcrumb after breadcrumb after breadcrumb, and I picked them all up. She knew what she was doing, but it also and I knew what she was doing, but it made me feel really good.
Yeah.
And my whole world has changed because of her influence.
There is nothing more beautiful than a woman fully in her power and fully expressing her depth, because we have so much to learn and it's exciting. It's things that we can't do on our own. To answer your question directly, be yourself. Bring it, because again, I didn't know what I didn't know to put in the Excel document. And I've learned, like Dominic's learned, like just things from women that I never would have touched the surface on, didn't know exists in this world.
Oh, so juicy. Okay. All right. What is the hardest thing about being and growing up male? That's a really good question.
The hardest thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what she said.
I'm going to use something that I shared at the Bold Leap Live event, which was an Esther Perel, the brilliant author and therapist, and she's written the book Mating in Captivity, The State of Affairs. I went to her event in New York City called The Paradox of Masculinity. And she said that femininity, your divine feminine, comes kind of like as a natural birthright. She says, when you have your period, like you're a woman.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And there's obviously a lot more that comes to it than that, but she's like...
And I want to preface for all the women that don't have their periods because they've lost them, you're still a woman.
Thank you for...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that like signals the kind of like the transition from girl to woman. And she's like, for men, it's not quite the same. Masculinity is not a natural birthright.
Wow.
Men have to go out and earn it and then vigilantly maintain your masculinity over a course of life's actions. And in that respect, it works a lot like how trust works. So you can spend your entire life building trust and then you can lose it in an instant because trust is fragile. And as it turns out, so is masculinity. And so men constantly hear things like, don't be a pussy, suck it up, are you going to take that? These are constant threats.
Gross and balls is a good Australian one as well.
What is it?
Gross and balls.
Grow some balls, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we have that here too.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's constantly like these moments of reckoning as to whether or not a man gets to keep his manhood. And we don't even recognize that we're constantly in defense mode. We constantly have our swords and shields up to try and defend Are we man enough? Can we stay in this group of guys where maybe they're on their 17th shot, and if I stop doing shots with them, I'm a pussy? If I don't go up and approach that woman, and if I don't have sex with her that night, even if I don't want to, but if I don't have a story to tell the guys the next day,
Fuck,
I'm
that's
not a man.
heartbreaking.
Yeah. We don't even recognize how deep this goes in because we're just constantly trying to preserve our masculinity, and we become very reactive. And most men can't articulate that because we don't see it. It's like we're so in the matrix of it that until we have conversations like these, we can step back and look at how much of our life's actions have been defined by preserving my own manhood.
And the irony in all of this is the most powerful dude in the room is the guy that can say no because I don't have to. No, because it's not aligned with me. I know guys like that. And I was like, whoa, I don't think I want to hang out with you because you scare me. Like fall in line.
Wow.
So that piece of it, as far as growing up and what masculinity is, certainly. Yeah.
And by the way, let's just be very clear. It's awesome being a man. I'm just answering the question.
And it's also being a woman. Exactly.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. I feel like when you are tapped in alignment, you know your powers, then you love being a man or a woman. And you don't want to be anybody else because you love you.
One of the things that my coach, my spiritual sexual intimacy coach, John Wineland, talks about is that men's nervous systems haven't been adequately trained to navigate the emotions of a woman and to navigate the power of a woman. So for example, let's just say a stunningly beautiful woman walks down the street. A man's nervous system could go fucking haywire. And like he could be stopped in his tracks. Like he will lose sight of everything that's going on, lose his breath. Like we've all experienced this sensation. And like words don't even come out of our mouth the right way.
So that thing on movies where guys like can't talk, it's like actually can happen.
Oh, that's real.
Wow. I didn't know that. That's so interesting.
And the emotional thing is also a thing as well. So like if a woman is in her storm, in her fury, in her fire, or maybe she's just like spiraling and a man hasn't learned how to train his nervous system to contain that, he can feel overwhelmed and collapse under it, especially, and I saw this a ton in Sex Addicts Anonymous, where there was a lot of men who were in there who had emotionally abusive mothers, emotionally overwhelming mothers, narcissistic mothers, needy mothers who made their sons surrogate husbands. And the kids who then turned into men, couldn't navigate, were triggered by a woman who was like in that fury and passion because they hadn't had their systems trained to navigate that.
Oh my God, so fucking interesting.
I'm from Chicago originally.
Okay.
And I was at a street festival in Chicago and I see this beautiful woman cross the street. I was like, oh man, I want to go talk to her. But then I got into like, well, what do I say? And like, how do I like, what do I do? And I'm sitting there talking to a buddy of mine and we're in conversation for like 3 hours on this. Like, what do I do? Like, what's my first line?
My
like,
God,
I don't know, give me another vodka lemonade. Like, right? Like, okay. So then the sun's starting to go down. The street,
my God.
The street festival is like
She's
getting ready to clear
another
out.
country by now.
Yeah. Well, she's like still there with her girlfriend and we made like no eye contact whatsoever.
Okay.
And so I remember her like leaving the place and walking. I'm like, now is the opportunity to trail her and be super creepy.
Yeah.
So I did. I trailed her.
Oh my God, I love this.
And I felt a little strange doing it, but I remember trailing her and all of a sudden, like she turns around like as I'm trailing her and I am like a deer in the headlights. And I don't know what to say. I look down and there's this hose from the street festival and it's spurting some water. And like the first thing that came to my mind was like spray. And I was just like, oh my God, I almost sprayed all over you.
Oh, Jesus.
And she's like, excuse me? I'm like, no, the water, there's a hose. And she's like, what? I'm like, can I just get your number? She's like, no, like, who are you?
Oh my God.
So when Dominic talks about this thing of overwhelm.
That's the best story ever.
Oh, it was just so embarrassing. I walked back with my head between my legs, like to my friend. He's like, how'd it go? I'm like, you saw how it went. Don't ask me stupid questions. And I ended, it was so funny. You know those people in life that you like, you see them in a lot of places? She ended up being one of those women. She'd look at me and be like, spray guy. And I don't like that guy.
You're a story in her life now.
She's telling this story in a different perspective, in a different podcast. Yeah.
So with that, actually, Australian men generalization, way less confident than American men. So you guys are typically...
Seriously?
Yeah, so you guys will typically go up to women in bars and like talk to women. Oh no, that does not happen, generally speaking, 90% of the time in Australia. Like, will not. A guy will stare at you for the whole fucking night, but he will not come up to you. I'm very much like, I really like a guy to make the first move. Not out of cockiness, but I'm like, I want you to want me. I need a man that's very, very confident.
I saw something that Matthew Hussey did about this recently, and I actually dig Matthew Hussey's work. So if you're not familiar with Matthew Hussey, he's a dating coach.
Yeah, he's great.
These are some of your listeners who may not know him.
Yeah.
I follow him on Instagram, and he did one on this recently where he actually shows what a woman can do at a bar to invite a man over.
Okay.
And it has a lot to do with like the eye contact and like holding the eye contact with a particular kind of smile, holding it longer than maybe like you feel a little bit comfortable with, but not too long where it becomes that like it can tip over into something else.
Yeah.
To recognize that it may take more than one of those eye contacts for the man to feel like he's ready to come over. Because like Bryan said, the 3 hours can go by before a guy's like worked up his confidence and he could have too many drinks. And then when he comes over, like he's toasted.
Well, so in Australia, the typical guy that come over to you has had like 50 drinks, right?
Yeah.
Because big drinking culture. And then you're like, get away from me. Like you are so drunk. Or as a woman, you're like, the only reason you're coming over to me is because you're so drunk. Like you didn't have the balls. I know I shouldn't say that, but you didn't have the balls to come over when you first wanted to.
Maybe you can have an appreciation for this, but do you realize how fucking hard?
Oh yeah, I would never be able to do it.
It would be hard enough.
Appreciation for that, yeah.
If like you were by yourself and I were to walk over and to get rejected by you is one thing, but now if you're surrounded by like 3 or 4 women like a fortress, and I've got to go over there and somehow figure out how to not come in from behind you, how to not interrupt your conversation, how to not squeeze in between your friend who clearly looks like she's protecting you, and I have to disarm her. Do you realize like how many things are on our minds?
Yeah,
With all the eyes of your guy friends watching you do it.
You also, like you're like in the ring about to get slaughtered, and so. So just think about...
So that invitation, really important.
Yeah, think about
so he knows things not going to fail.
There's always a possibility of failure.
Right.
But it's like, can he feel good walking up knowing, okay, it looks like she's given me some sort of permission. Her friends also look like they're not going to be the, what's this fucking guy doing? He's got 20 seconds to prove himself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so there's that.
Oh my God, I love that.
I read a study recently that said that in cases where nobody's met before, like let's say a bar situation that we're talking about here, 85% of the time, a woman makes the first move. Now, the first move is not "hello, my name is," and it's not walking over. But the first move is that eye contact. That first movement is positioning the body, the feet towards the guy. And women do this instinctively. They're not trying to do anything. But 85% of the time, that's what. And if guys are paying attention, right? If they can see that, they can jump on it. But oftentimes we miss it.
Oh my God, so good. Okay, next question. Do guys like it more when women take control sexually, or do they prefer to be... she hasn't finished the question. It cut off. I think I already know the answer.
Yeah, it depends, right? It totally depends.
Both are nice.
I think that what I prefer is I find it super attractive when a woman knows what she wants and she's into that and not afraid. I also love to take control sometimes. I also like to breathe with my partner sometimes. Yeah. It's not just depends on the person, depends on the situation, depends on the time of the day, depends on like a lot of different things. 100%. So I
feel like our major theme is like there's no one answer for these things.
There's no one answer, but I can tell you that
end of podcast, no one answer. Bye, bitches.
I was dating somebody in Chicago. She was super cute and like sweet.
The chick that you saw on the street?
It was not her. Well, her and I never went on the dates. That didn't pan out. Yeah. Some work to do there. I was dating a different woman, and she was super sweet, and I wasn't very experimental sexually. Yeah. And she's like, "Hey, Bryan, I want to tie you up, like put handcuffs on you on the bed." I'm like, "You do? Wow!" Like, I've never done that before, but I'm kind of okay. I'm down for it. So I'm in her room. First time, my hands are up above my head. She gets on top of me and she rides me, and it was like okay, but I was nervous the entire time. Yeah. I was like,
What were you nervous about?
Because I'm so used to using my hands. I'm so used to being in some level of control. Like I was just kind of like sitting back, and I didn't like that all that much. But the part I really didn't like is that she got excited after she locked me up, and I didn't see this, but she did something with the key. And she couldn't find the key afterwards.
Oh, fuck.
So now I'm sitting there with my hands above my head, flaccid, flappy penis. As she's walking around the room, having to move the entire bed, trying to find this fucking key.
Oh, wow, that really ruined it.
Yeah, I'm sitting there for like 30 minutes and getting cold now.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I prefer to be in control with the exception of I'm willing to experiment.
I feel like what I really like, because I like to be in control sometimes too, but what I really like is when I start off in control and then he takes more control. So if I open the front door with like a really little outfit on or whatever, and so it's like I'm taking that initial lead and then he does the rest. You know, like I come up behind him when he's making dinner, and so I take that initial step and then I love surrendering, and then he takes control, something like that.
So that's really interesting, the way that you positioned how you take control. And I wouldn't have even categorized that as control. But it is. Because I open the door. No, I'm at your door, right?
Yeah,
and then it's all of a sudden it's like, whoa, I didn't expect you to be dressed like that. So you've set the stage, and then maybe you lead me to another place and we're going to do something, and I want to pounce on you and you say, stop.
Yeah.
And then like you build my desire more. And then there's like this moment where I take it from there.
It gets to a point where like, I'm like, no, you're not allowed to touch. Like I'm in control. And then you jump 10 steps above the control and you're like, no. And then you take all the lead after I've just like teasing almost.
Yeah.
Or telling you what I want to do, but like you're not allowed to do it yet. And then it's like you take way more control and then I have to fully surrender. Like that's hard.
So they have noticed that women in their power are really good at subtly getting what they want.
Oh, without question.
And like that is a really great example of like, hey, I'm feeling this way. Like, let me just initiate this. And then just knowing she's going to press the right button to make the guy go, what?
Yeah.
Let me react.
Totally. And I think like women who are really embodied in their sexuality and sensuality can do those slow movements that you were talking about before. Like I had a partner who she built this energy up inside of me, kind of like that champagne bottle you were talking about. Just like, oh my God, I want to pounce and devour this woman.
Yeah.
And she was just like, stand right fucking there, right? She just like made me stand in the spot, and then she stood in front of me and turned around and she took her hair up, you know, like and held it up over her head and then let it fall very slowly so I could see the back of her neck and I could see it come down across her shoulders, and then she would turn around and she would very slowly like lift her neck up so I could see the exposed neckline, which is like a beautiful place I just want to bite into like a vampire.
Yeah.
And then she would just walk slowly around me, taking her hand and very gently touching across my chest.
It's that soft touch.
The softness, that like constantly fed energy. And this is one of the things, again, I'm learning from my teachers in the sensual sexual space. Men are constantly craving energy, and women are remarkable sources of energy giving. And I found that like when I'm with a woman who's in her embodied state of femininity, I give like 1 part of energy, I get 10 back from her.
Yeah, that's so true.
And so she was able to create this place where I was so shook that when I could tell that it was time to take the lead, then she fully surrendered, and it was wild.
Oh my God, yum. And I feel like when you were also saying that as well, we're very overstimulated as humans. So when you bring softness back, where it's like your hand is hovering over your skin, your senses become so heightened. And it's that whole orgasmic meditation stuff where it's like your senses become so heightened that the slow sex is the best sex. Like where it's like 3 hours long, the slowest thing ever, your like nervous system is like on fucking fire, basically.
Lila told us, I know she didn't tell us this, but I heard on one of her other podcasts, there's a woman who she has a podcast called Horizontal with Lila, and she lies down with her guests in a bed, and it's like slow talk radio, so that she gets like pillow talk. And we did an interview in my bedroom, so she was lying between both Bryan and I. Yeah. And one of her things is slower than slow, and then slower than that.
Seriously though.
And I've implemented that, and it's like, holy shit, like every little sound, every little breath, every little movement, every little like the hair falling, you could feel and sense.
It's like time slows down.
I really wonder if there's a question that's faster that we could talk about, because I'm getting quite turned on.
Yeah, I know.
And I'm going to have a hard time articulating anything slow for the next hour or two.
Ryan gets worried about spontaneous boners.
Yeah, so, let's do one more question, because
inopportune would.
Yeah. How long have we been going for? I feel like we've been going for ages.
This is we're an hour and a half here.
Oh my God, amazing. Okay, I think I already know the answer to this one. It's the invitation. How do you get men to open up and tell you how they're feeling instead of keeping to themselves? What I always find is I do it first. It opens the door for them. If I'm vulnerable first, then I find that they're more likely to be vulnerable unless they're wounded, and then nothing happens. And I'm like, well, see ya.
Yeah, I've got 2 answers for this.
Okay.
So the first one is, and when I said this at the Bold Leap Live event the other day, if you become unshockable, meaning like if I can share something with you and you're not going to have a big emotional reaction to it, you can just like hold it and hear me, then I know that you're safe to share with. And
That was good when you said that. I was like, damn.
yeah, because if you can become safe to share, then I will share more with you.
Yeah.
My big fear is that I'm going to share something with you. I'm going to open my heart to you. And then it's going to quickly turn into you're hurt by that, or there's something that like now I need to manage, and it completely shuts down my process of opening my heart up to you. And maybe I don't necessarily know how to deal with your emotional reaction. By the way, it's not to say that you can't have an emotional reaction,
Yeah.
but it's like, if you're truly interested in me opening up to you, then you've now entered space where you're holding it for me.
And I always just say, just breathe for a second. Like, let someone talk, breathe, then react. That not even react, then speak. Don't just like get triggered straight away and then just like fucking go AWOL at them. Like, breathe for a second, because again, that language barrier, like that communication barrier of like, you're probably meaning in a different way, possibly to how we are taking it. So just think about it for a second from your perspective.
Totally. Beyond that, it's just maintain curiosity. So don't just ask me one question and then like I respond to it, and then you give me your dissertation of what your feelings were, what your thought, or what your advice is. Keep asking me questions.
Yeah.
That curiosity shows that you actually care about what it is that I'm saying, and that can take some time, and I may need to be led. Sometimes I don't know what I'm feeling. Sometimes I don't know what I'm getting at, and like your curiosity will help me unlock that.
I know one of my personal patterns is, as much as I can get on a stage and talk on a podcast about my stories and everything else, there's stimulus here that I can respond to.
Yes.
And I don't naturally just go to that place, even with a partner, where I'm just telling stories. And by them asking me the question, I know it's a safe conversation to have.
Okay.
So that curiosity piece for me is really, really big.
Yeah.
You've done an exceptional job with that today, Monica. Like, I mean, this has been an amazing, Bryan and I have done a lot of conversations around this, and like the questions that you've been asking, you've been drawing us out and prompting us to think about. And I'm hearing stories from Bryan that I haven't heard before.
Oh my God, yay.
So that's like a perfect example of how to do it.
Beautiful. Thank you guys so much for coming on. It was so good to meet you. The event on the weekend was amazing, and I really appreciate you guys spending time with me today.
We loved it.
This was a ton of fun and always a great learning. So thank you.
Oh my God. No, thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Man Amongst Men podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you want more access to tools and resources, and you want information on our upcoming live events and retreats, head on over to www.doinnerwork.com.